You know the conversation I'm talking about, the one you keep replaying in your mind, the words you wish you hadn't said, the response that hurt you, the silence that followed when you needed warmth, the rejection that landed like a stone in your chest, the interview where you froze, the argument that spiraled beyond repair. You've been carrying it with you, haven't you? Turning it over and over like a bruise you can't stop pressing. And somewhere in you there's this feeling that it's fixed now, set in stone, part of your permanent record. That conversation is over. The damage is done. But I tell you something now that will seem impossible until you prove it to yourself. That conversation isn't over. Not at all. In fact, you have the power right now, tonight, in the privacy of your own consciousness, to rewrite it completely. Not to pretend it didn't happen. Not to merely comfort yourself about it, but to actually revise it at the level where all conversations truly occur, where all events are born, and watch as outer reality bends to reflect that revision back to you. This is not fantasy. This is not wishful thinking. This is the most practical and proven use of your imagination that exists. You are about to learn something that Neville Goddard taught with absolute conviction, something he proved again and again in his own life and in the lives of thousands who applied it. You are going to learn how to take that conversation, that interaction, that moment that went wrong, and change it. You're going to learn why revision works, how quickly the outer world adjusts when you've genuinely revised from the inside, and exactly how to do this tonight before you fall asleep. Welcome. If this is your first time here, you've arrived at the right moment. And if you've been walking with these teachings for some time, what we explore today will deepen everything you already know. Today we are talking about one of the most immediate, most tangible applications of Neville's law. We're talking about revising the conversation that went wrong, the argument, the rejection, the interview that collapsed, the moment where everything fell apart. You're going to see that the conversation you think is finished is actually still unfolding in consciousness, and consciousness is the only reality. Everything else is shadow. Everything else is effect. You change the cause, and the effect must follow. By the end of this session, you will understand not only how to revise, but why it works with such uncanny precision. You'll know what to do tonight, and you'll have the confidence that comes from seeing the principle clearly. So let's begin. Let me take you into the teaching itself. You must first understand what actually happened in that conversation. I don't mean the words exchanged or the events that unfolded in the outer world. I mean what happened in consciousness. Because Neville tells us over and over, consciousness is the only reality. The world you see, the people you meet, the conversations you have, they are all projections of states of consciousness. The world is yourself pushed out. That person who said those terrible things to you, that employer who rejected you, that lover who turned cold, they are all you. Not separate agents acting upon you, but reflections, symbolic representations of your own inner speech, your own assumptions, your own dwelling place in consciousness. Now this doesn't mean you cause them to be cruel by thinking cruel thoughts about them. It's subtler than that. It means that everything you experience is an outpicturing of a state you are occupying. And here's the critical part. Here's where revision becomes not just possible but inevitable. If the outer event is only a shadow, only reflection, then the true event, the real event, happened in imagination first. And what happened in imagination can be revised in imagination. The shadow has no power. It cannot hold you. The reflection in the mirror cannot dictate what you look like. You dictate the reflection by what you bring before the mirror. When that conversation went wrong, when those words were said, when that door was closed in your face, the objective world recorded it. Other people remember it. You remember it. But memory itself is an active imagination. And imagination is the divine creative power in you. So when you remember that conversation, you are imagining it now. You think you're passively recalling something fixed, but you're not. You are actively constructing it again in this moment. And if you can construct it as it was, you can construct it as you wish it had been. And when you do that with feeling, with sensory vividness, with a full conviction of reality, something extraordinary happens. You don't just feel better about the past. You actually change the past, not the dead past, because the past is not dead. The past is a present imaginal activity, and present imaginal activity determines future physical events. Neville spoke about this frequently. especially in the later years of his teaching. He called it revision, and he said it quite plainly. Every night before you sleep, revise your day. If something happened that you did not like, if someone offended you, if you responded poorly, if any event was not to your liking, replay it in imagination, as it should have been. Feel it. Hear the words as they should have been spoken. See the person's face warm and approving instead of cold and critical, and let that revision be the last thing your consciousness dwells upon before sleep. Do this, and you will be astonished at how quickly the objective world conforms. The person will treat you differently. The opportunity you thought was lost will reappear in a new form. The relationship you thought was damaged will heal in ways you could not have orchestrated consciously. Let me give you a concrete case, one that Neville himself shared. A woman attended one of his lectures and told him this story. She had a terrible argument with her daughter. Words were exchanged that cut deep. The daughter left the house angry, and the mother was sick with regret. She couldn't eat. She couldn't think of anything else. She couldn't think of anything else. She kept replaying the scene, hearing her own harsh words, seeing her daughter's hurt face. Then she remembered Neville's teaching on revision. That night, lying in bed, she imagined the conversation again. But this time, she heard herself speaking gently. She saw herself listening with patience. She felt her daughter's warmth. She heard her daughter say, "I love you, Mom," and she felt the embrace. She did this with such vividness, such feeling, that it felt more real than the actual argument. She fell asleep in that scene. The next morning her daughter called. The tone was soft, affectionate. The daughter said, "Mom, I don't even know why I was so upset yesterday. I love you. Let's have lunch." The mother was stunned. She hadn't apologized outwardly. She hadn't sent a message. She had only revised inwardly. But the revision was so complete, so real in consciousness, that the outer reflection had no choice but to conform. The daughter had no memory of the harshness. It was as though it had never been. Now you might say, "But I remember the argument." Other people remember it. How can it be changed? And here's where you must make a leap in understanding. You are not changing the past as a fixed sequence of events on a timeline. You are changing the state from which that past is being viewed and remembered. And in changing the state, you change the meaning, the power, and ultimately the continuing effects of that event. The people involved will remember it differently, or they will forget it, or they will act as though it never had the weight you gave it. Because they are not separate from you. They are part of the play your consciousness is projecting. Change the projector, and the movie changes. Neville put it this way. He said, "The world is a mirror, forever reflecting what you are doing within yourself. If you keep replaying the argument, the rejection, the failure, you are doing it again and again within yourself. And the world will continue to reflect that vibration, that state, back to you. The person will remain cold. The opportunity will remain closed. The opportunity will remain closed. The damage will seem permanent. But the moment you stop replaying the old scene and begin replaying the revised scene, the moment you do that with feeling and conviction, you have changed what you are doing within yourself. And the mirror must reflect the new activity. This is not about positive thinking. This is not about positive thinking. This is not about affirmations or pretending. This is about entering into a new state so completely that it becomes your truth externalizes. Truth makes itself known. Truth is reality. You don't need to convince anyone else. You don't need to explain yourself or defend your revision. You simply live in the state of the wish fulfilled, the conversation as you desired it to be, and let the world catch up. And it will. Sometimes within hours, sometimes within days. But always, always, the outer world will conform to the inner conviction. Now let's go deeper. Let's talk about how quickly this adjustment happens, and why it happens at all. This is where the teaching moves from interesting idea to lived experience. You need to understand the mechanics of consciousness, not intellectually, but experientially, so that when you revise, you do it with full confidence. Neville taught that an assumption, though false if persisted in, will harden into fact. This is the law. It works both ways. If you assume you are rejected, unwanted, misunderstood, and you persist in that assumption, the world will continue to reflect rejection and misunderstanding back to you. People will react to you as though you are those things, because you are broadcasting that state. You walk into a room assuming you are unwelcome, and you will find coldness. You enter a conversation assuming conflict, and conflict will arise, not because the other person is against you, but because you are against yourself in that state. And the world is always, always yourself pushed out. But here's the liberation. If a false assumption persisted in becomes fact, then a true assumption, a desired assumption persisted in, must also become fact. If you assume that conversation went beautifully, that the person received you warmly, that you spoke with confidence and grace, and you persist in that assumption, it will harden into fact. The outer world will rearrange itself to match. The person will call you back. The opportunity will reopen. The relationship will heal. And often it happens so smoothly, so naturally, that the other person has no idea anything was ever wrong. This is what Neville meant when he said, "Dare to assume the state you desire." He wasn't speaking poetically. He was giving you the key to the kingdom. Assumption is the power, not hope, not wishing. Assumption. To assume is to take it for granted, to live as though it is so, to think from it rather than of it. And when you revise a conversation, you are assuming it happened the way you desired. You are thinking from the reality of the successful conversation, the loving exchange, the approving response. And in doing so, you are dwelling in a different state, and the state you dwell in determines what comes into your world. How quickly does it manifest? Faster than you think. Neville often said, the only thing that delays manifestation is your doubt, your return to the old state. If you revise tonight with full feeling, and then tomorrow you replay the old argument in your mind, worry about it, complain about it, you are undoing your revision. You are re-entering the old state. The world will hesitate. It will seem like nothing is changing. But if you revise and remain faithful to the revision, if you refuse to return to the old story, if you simply know it's done, then the change comes swiftly. I'll give you another example, this time from a man Neville spoke with after a lecture in Los Angeles. This man had a job interview that went disastrously. He was nervous, stumbled over his words, gave poor answers. The interviewer was cold and dismissive. The man left knowing he had failed. He went home and brooded for hours. Then he remembered Neville's teaching. That night, he lay in bed and replayed the interview. But this time, he was calm. He saw himself confident, articulate, impressive. He heard the interviewer say, "We'd love to have you on the team." He felt the handshake, warm and firm. He felt the relief and joy of knowing he'd been hired. He repeated this scene several times until it felt utterly natural, utterly real. Then he fell asleep. 3 days later, the company called. They wanted him to come in for a second interview. He went, and this time, in the outer world, he was calm and confident. The interviewer was warm and engaged. He got the job. When he told Neville, Neville simply smiled and said, "You revised. You changed the state. The world had no choice but to conform." The man said, "But they remembered the first interview. They saw me stumble." Neville replied, "They remembered a version that allowed them to call you back. You changed the meaning of it in consciousness. The facts are plastic. States are the only reality. Do you see? The outer event is not the power. The state is the power, and you are free at any moment to enter a new state. The past does not bind you, unless you bind yourself to it, by constant repetition and imagination. The moment you revise, you cut the thread. You step out of that state and into a new one. And the world, being a mirror, must reflect the new state. Now let's talk about arguments and rejections specifically, because these are the conversations that haunt us most. An argument is an exchange where two states collided. You were in a state, they were in a state, and conflict arose. But here's what you must see. The other person is you. They are playing a role in your world, a role determined by the state you occupy. If you occupy a state of defensiveness, you will meet attack. If you occupy a state of lack, you will meet rejection. If you occupy a state of lack, you will meet rejection. If you occupy a state of lackworthin, not because the other person is cruel, but because your consciousness is summoning that reflection. So when an argument happens, the immediate instinct is to defend yourself, to prove you were right, to demand an apology. But all of that is working from the outside, trying to change the mirror. It doesn't work. Even if you win the argument, even if they apologize, if you remain in the state of conflict, the argument will resurface in new forms. The relationship will remain tense. But if you revise the argument, you are changing the state. You are moving into the state of harmony, of understanding, of love. And from that state, the argument cannot exist. The person will soften. The tension will dissolve. Often they will reach out to you without you saying a word. Neville told of a woman who had a bitter fight with her sister. They hadn't spoken in weeks. The woman was angry, hurt, and convinced her sister was entirely to blame. Then she came to a lecture and heard about revision. She was skeptical, but desperate. That night she revised the fight. Instead of harsh words, she imagined a warm conversation. She heard her sister laugh. She felt the hug. She made it so real that tears came to her eyes. She fell asleep in that feeling. The very next morning her sister called. She said, "I miss you. Can we talk?" They met for coffee, and the whole fight seemed to have lost its charge. They never even discussed it. The relationship was restored, as though the fight had been a bad dream. This happens over and over. I am not giving you theory. I am giving you testimony. Real people, real situations, real transformations, and it all comes down to this simple principle. Consciousness is the only reality. The conversation you are replaying in your mind is the real conversation. If you are replaying the hurtful version, you are keeping it alive, feeding it energy, and the world will mirror it back endlessly. But when you revise it, when you replay the loving version, the successful version, the harmonious version, you are feeding that. And that is what must manifest. Now let me address something that often stops people from revising. You think it's dishonest. You think you're lying to yourself. You think you're denying reality. But you must understand what reality is. The objective world is not reality. It is the shadow of 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 reality. The objective world is only the outpicturing, and it has no permanence, no power, no independence. It is utterly subservient to imagination. So when you revise, you are not denying reality, you are correcting it. You are aligning the outer with the inner truth. And the inner truth is that you are the operant power. You are not a victim of conversations, of people, of circumstances. You are the creator of all of it. Neville said, "You are told, I am the Lord thy God." That I am is your awareness. That is God. There is no other God. When you say, "I am rejected," you are declaring yourself to be rejection. And God, your awareness, cannot fail to embody that declaration. But when you revise and say, "I am accepted, I am loved, I am accepted, I am subscore," you are declaring a new state. And God, your awareness, must embody that. This is not magic. This is law. Scientific, repeatable, inevitable. Let's go even further. Let's talk about what happens in the days after you revise. This is where faith is tested and where most people fall away. You revise the conversation tonight. You feel it deeply. You fall asleep in the wish fulfilled. Tomorrow comes and nothing has changed outwardly. The person hasn't called. The opportunity hasn't called. The opportunity hasn't returned. The damage still seems real. And immediately doubt creeps in. It didn't work. It's not real. I'm fooling myself. And in that moment, you abandon the new state and return to the old. You start replaying the hurtful conversation again. You start telling friends about how badly it went. You reinforce the old story. And of course, the world reflects that. The change you might have seen never comes because you didn't persist. Neville taught that persistence is everything. Faith is loyalty to the unseen reality. You must be loyal to the revision. You must live as though it is done, even before you see it. This doesn't mean pretending nothing is wrong. It means refusing to feed the old story any more energy. When the memory of the old conversation comes up, gently replace it with the revised version. When someone asks what happened, you don't need to lie. You can simply say, "It's handled," or "It's working out," and move the conversation elsewhere. You are not denying the old event. You are withdrawing life from it. You are giving your attention, your feeling, your faith to the new event, the revised event. And then one day, suddenly, the outer world catches up. The person calls. The email arrives. The door opens. And it happens so naturally, so easily, that it seems like it was always going to happen. This is how consciousness works. It doesn't force, it doesn't struggle. It simply assumes, and the world conforms. But you must hold the assumption. You must wake in the state. You must be faithful. Let me walk you now into the practical application. This is what you will do tonight, and every night until the change has fully manifested. You are going to revise that conversation. You're going to do it with method, with clarity, with feeling. And you're going to release it, knowing it is done. First, tonight, as you lie in bed ready for sleep, bring the conversation to mind. But do not replay it as it happened. Instead, replay it as you wish it had happened. Instead, replay it as you wish it had happened. If it was an argument, hear the words spoken in love. Hear understanding in the other person's voice. See their face soft, open, receptive. If it was a rejection, hear them say yes. Hear enthusiasm. Hear approval. If it was an interview that went badly, see yourself confident, articulate, and see the interviewer nodding, smiling, saying, "You're exactly what we need." Make it sensory. Don't just think about it. Experience it. Hear the tone of their voice. Feel the warmth in the room. See the details. What are they wearing? How are they standing? What does their face look like when they smile at you? The more sensory you make it, the more real it becomes. And reality is what you are constructing here. You are not fantasizing. You are building the true event in imagination, and imagination is the workshop of creation. As you replay this revised conversation, let yourself feel the relief, the joy, the satisfaction of it going well. Don't force the feeling. Just allow it. Let the scene imply the feeling. If you hear them say, "I'm sorry, I overreacted," or "You're hired," or "I love you," what do you feel? Let that feeling wash over you. Relax into it. This is the state of the wish fulfilled. This is the state of the wish fulfilled. This is the feeling that hardens into fact. Now here's the key. You must do this in a relaxed, drowsy state. Neville called this the state akin to sleep, or SATS. It's that moment when you're drifting off, when the conscious mind loosens its grip and the subconscious is open and receptive. This is the moment when impressions sink deepest. So don't do this exercise while you're wide awake and tense. Do it as you're settling into bed, lights off, body comfortable, mind quiet. Let yourself drift into the scene. Loop it gently. Hear the words. Feel the feeling. See the smiles. And then let sleep take you. The last thing your consciousness dwells upon before sleep is the seed that will sprout in your world. If you find your mind wandering back to the old conversation, to the hurt, to the failure, gently bring it back. Don't fight it. Don't condemn yourself. Just redirect. No, that's not how it happened. This is how it happened. And replay the revised version again. You are training your imagination. You are reprogramming the subconscious. And the subconscious, once impressed, must expect. Do this every night. Not obsessively, not desperately, but faithfully. Make it your practice. And during the day, if the old memory surfaces, replace it. Don't rehearse the wound. Rehearse the revision. Live in the new story. Speak from the new story. Speak from the new story. And watch with wonder as the people involved begin to shift. They will reach out. They will soften. They will forget the offense. Or they will remember it differently, in a way that no longer carries pain. The outer world will conform because consciousness is the cause and the world is the effect. You might ask, what if the person never reaches out? What if they don't change? And I tell you, if you are truly faithful to the revision, one of two things will happen. Either they will change, often in miraculous ways, or they will simply fade from your world, and a new, better version of that relationship will appear. Someone new who fulfills the same role, but in harmony. Because you are not manipulating people. You are changing states, and different states attract different reflections. If you move into the state of being loved and respected, you will be surrounded by people who love and respect you. The old actors may transform, or new actors may transform, or new actors may take the stage. Either way, you win, because you are operating from consciousness, from cause, from power. Let me give you one more example, and this one is profound. Neville told of a man who had a business meeting that went terribly. He was seeking a partnership, and the potential partner was rude, dismissive, and insulting. The man left humiliated and angry. But that night he revised. He imagined the meeting going beautifully. He heard the partner say, "I'd be honored to work with you." He felt the handshake of agreement. He did this for 3 nights in a row. On the 4th day, he received a letter from the partner, a letter of apology and an invitation to meet again. They met, and the partnership was formed. The man asked Neville how did he forget how cruel he was. Neville said, "He didn't forget. You changed the event in consciousness. The insult never had final reality. Only your assumption has final reality. Only your assumption has final reality. And you assume success. Do you see the power here? Do you see your freedom? You are not bound by history of other people's moods or decisions. You are the author. You write the script in imagination and the world performs it. This is not arrogance. This is truth. This is the law. And the law is no respecter of persons. It works for anyone who applies it. Now let's pull back and look at the deeper spiritual truth here. Why does this matter beyond getting an apology or a second chance? Why does revision matter in the grand scheme of your awakening? Because it teaches you who are. It reveals that you are not a body moving through space and time, reacting to events outside yourself. You are consciousness itself, the creator of space and time, the projector of all events. Every conversation you have is a conversation with yourself. Every person you have is a conversation with yourself. Every person you meet is yourself in disguise. And when you revise, you are taking responsibility for the entire drama. You are stepping into your role as God. Neville often quoted scripture as mystical truth. He loved the line from Paul, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." That is revision. You renew your mind. You change the inner conversation, and transformation follows. Not someday, now. He also quoted, "If any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. All things are become new." To be in Christ is to be in the imagination, in the creative power. And when you are there, when you dare to imagine a new conversation, a new reality, the old literally passes away. It loses power. It becomes irrelevant. All things become new. This is the promise. Not that you'll get what you want if you're good enough or lucky enough or if God deems you worthy. No. The promise is that you are the power. You are the one deciding. You are the one imagining. And what you imagine with feeling and persistence must come to pass. This is the gospel, the good news. You are not a beggar hoping for scraps. You are the king, seated on the throne of consciousness, decreeing reality into being. And here's the beauty. Once you prove this to yourself with something small, with a single conversation, your faith grows. You start revising other things. An email you wish you hadn't sent. A presentation that flopped. A moment of embarrassment. And each time you see the outer world adjust. You see people change. You see circumstances shift. And gradually you realize there is no circumstance outside your control. There is no person who can truly harm you. There is only consciousness and its infinite capacity to create and recreate. This is liberation. Not someday when you ascend or evolve or become enlightened. Now, right now, you are already the power. You've just been using it unconsciously, creating by default, reacting instead of authoring. But now you know. Now you've been told. And once you know, you cannot unknow. You can only choose. Will you continue replaying the old conversations, the old wounds, the old failures? Or will you revise? Will you dare to assume the conversation went as you desired? Will you live in that assumption until the world has no choice but to reflect it back? I tell you, try it. Try it tonight. Take the conversation that's been haunting you. The one you came here to resolve. The one that made you click on this video. Revise it. See it as you wish it had been. Hear the words you long to hear. Feel the warmth, the acceptance, the success, and fall asleep in that state. Do it with sincerity. Do it with feeling. And then watch. Watch how quickly the person changes. Watch how the door reopens. Watch how the past, which you thought was fixed, becomes fluid. This is not theory. This is not speculation. This is proven, repeatable. demonstrable. Thousands have done it. Neville lived it daily, and you are no different. You have the same consciousness. You have the same power. The only question is, will you use it? And when you do, when you see that first shift, that first miracle, you will never be the same. You will walk through life knowing that nothing is permanent except consciousness. Every conversation, every event, every circumstance is subject to revision. And you are the reviser, you are the author, you are the operant power. This is the truth Neville came to teach. This is the pearl of great price. And it's yours now. Before we close, I want to leave you with one final thought. The conversation that went wrong was not a mistake. It was not evidence that you failed, or that you're unworthy, or that the other person is your enemy. It was a mirror. It showed you a state you were in. And now that you see it, you can change it. The conversation was a gift, because it brought you here. It brought you to this teaching. It brought you to the realization that you are not helpless. You are not a victim. You are the creator. So tonight as you lie down to sleep, do not rehearse the pain. Do not replay the rejection, the harshness, the failure. Instead, revise. Build the scene as you wish it had been. Feel it real, and let that be the last thing you impress upon consciousness. Let that be the seed you plant, and trust with absolute certainty that the harvest will come. It must. It is law. That conversation isn't over. Not at all. In fact, it's just beginning, because now we know how it truly ends. Not in hurt, not in failure, not in separation, but in love, in success, in harmony. And when the world reflects that back to you, when the person reaches out, when the opportunity returns, you will smile, because you will know, without a doubt, that you did that, not by begging, not by forcing, but by assuming, by standing in the state of the wish fulfilled. And in that moment, you will be living proof of the greatest truth ever taught. Consciousness is the only reality, and you are that consciousness. You are the power. You are the way. You are the truth and the life. Go now and revise. Dare to assume it, and let the world show you who you really are. Sleep well tonight, in the conversation you desired, and wake tomorrow to a world that has already begun to change.